Welcome back. Now we have learned the evolution of web. Now let us understand the fundamental concepts in blockchain. Before getting into it, let us understand why we need blockchain. Usually, when we want to give money to someone, we usually do a physical transaction. That is, we hand over the money directly to the person. So let us assume Alice wants to send some money to Bob. If it is a physical money, she can send the money directly or she can hand over the money directly to Bob. But what will happen in the case of a digital transaction? Nowadays, we do a lot of digital transactions. What happens in the case of digital transaction? Alice wants to send money to Bob, but she cannot send money directly to Bob because if Alice sends money, she has to keep track of that particular transaction. Where can she keep track of it? Can she keep track of it in her own local storage, or can she keep track of the transaction in a mail? Which is quite not possible. So Alice and Bob, they get the help of another person called as Dave. So now Alice and Bob, they agree upon having Dave as their middleman. So whatever the transaction, what Alice is making, the Dave will be keeping track of it. And whatever the transaction Bob is making, Dave will also be keeping track of that. So there is a necessity of a ledger which should be maintained by a person or a third person called Dave. When Alice sends money to Bob, Dave will keep track of that transaction in a ledger. But there's no other go. Both Alice and Bob should believe that Dave will be keeping track of the record properly. There is a possibility of having a middleman, or Alice and Bob completely depend on the middleman. What is a decentralized ledger then? The earlier one was a centralized ledger. Now you could see a copy of the ledger is available with everyone, including Alice and Bob. So, if any transaction is happening, when Alice sends money to Bob, the information is not only stored in Alice's ledger and also in Bob's ledger and also in all the other person's ledger. So what happens here is we have taken out the necessity of a person to maintain the ledger or the necessity of Alice and Bob to depend on a third person to maintain their ledger or their transactions. Concept is what called as a decentralized ledger. While here we could see only one copy of the ledger is present, and this is called as a centralized ledger. What happens if this ledger is getting deleted or it's getting forged by Dave? Nobody knows about it. But here, in the case of a decentralized ledger, even Alice and Bob, they cannot change any values in the ledger. And not only Alice and Bob, everyone else will not be able to change anything in the ledger. Because even if they change, they'll be able to change only, or they'll be successful in changing their own ledger and not others' ledger. Hence, it is highly impossible to forge a data in a decentralized ledger. What is blockchain? Blockchain, it is a ledger, and of course, it is a decentralized ledger, and it keeps track of actions that is occurring. And since it is a decentralized ledger, once stored, the details that is stored cannot be modified, which means blockchain is immutable. So immutable means the value once entered cannot be modified. And there is no middleman. So whenever there is no middleman, there is no necessity to pay some extra money to the middleman in order to maintain the ledger. And the blockchain is built completely on a decentralized and peer-to-peer network. When you look at this picture, there is no middleman and the work is completely decentralized, or the blockchain technology is built on a decentralized ledger technology. Blockchain it is made up of blocks. And whenever a transaction is made, the transaction will get added to the block. On an average, it could have around 500 to 1000 transactions. It depends upon the type of blockchain that we are using. Now, when A wanted to send money to B, there will be a block of transaction in which that particular transaction will be added, and this block of transaction will be broadcasted to every node or every party which is participating in the network. Now, all the nodes will be verifying the transaction, and if the transaction is correct, all the nodes will be approving the transaction. Once everyone has approved, or at least 51% of all the nodes have approved, then this particular new block will be added to the blockchain, and on successful addition of the block, now the money will move from A to B. So the transaction is complete. Now, what is blockchain? Here we could see a transaction is stored in a block, and that block is added to another block, or we could say we are getting a chain of blocks. So blockchain is chain of blocks, and each block will contain multiple transactions. So what is a blockchain? So according to the Linux Foundation Hyperledger, the blockchain can be defined as a peer-to-peer distributed ledger where it will have its own consensus protocol, and there will be set of smart contracts. No worries, we'll be learning about what do you mean by peer-to-peer distributed ledger, consensus, and smart contract, everything in a while. What is a peer-to-peer network? So peer-to-peer network is a network where you will have multiple nodes participating, or we can say each node is a computer or a system which is capable of doing some processing, and each node is connected to each other or in a network, or we can say this kind of topology, you call it as a mesh topology. Each node is connected to other node. There will not be any central server. As we have seen in Web 2 and Web 3 difference, in Web 3 applications, we will not have any central server. So there is no governing authority at all. So in a peer-to-peer network, there is no governing authority, and every node will cooperate with each other and they'll be accomplishing some task. This kind of architecture is what called as a peer-to-peer architecture. The type of network is called as a peer-to-peer network. The peer-to-peer network will look something like this, and when we have blocks of transactions that are part of this distributed peer-to-peer network, you will have all the copies, or we can say the blocks copies will be available with all the nodes. Even if the hacker tried to hack one copy of the distributed ledger, it would be highly impossible for the hacker to hack all the values or all the copies of the distributed ledger, which is nothing but a blockchain. So even if one copy of the blockchain is getting hacked, the other copies will not be hacked, and hence finally the correct copy will be maintained. So it will be highly impossible for a hacker to hack a distributed peer-to-peer network where you will have multiple copies of the data available. Blockchain is a distributed ledger. As we have discussed already, each node will be maintaining a ledger, or we can say the set of transactions which are stored in blocks, and each node will be maintaining the ledger, and all the nodes will have the same set of ledger or same copy of the ledger in their own memory. What is consensus? So consensus is a next word that we could see in the definition. So consensus is something like a process in which each and every node will agree on some conditions or some state. So let us assume this previous state. So now, even if the hacker hacks one set of block, now all the other nodes will come to a consensus or an agreement whether to take that copy or not. When each and every node talks to each other, they'll come to know that every one of their copies are same and this copy is different. And hence they will come to a consensus that only these copies are valid, or the copy that they are owning is valid and the other one is not valid. So this kind of decision will be taken among all the nodes through message passing. So they pass on messages among each other and they will come to a common agreement whether to accept a particular state or not. This is what called as a consensus. We'll be learning about a lot of protocols that are running behind blockchain to ensure that all the nodes are having the same state or same global state. So we'll learn about that in the future videos. And we have learned about or we have seen another word which is called as smart contract. So what is a contract? Generally it is called as a deal. So when two persons agree on some kind of a deal, they write down the contract on the paper and they will hand over or they will register this contract with a third party. And finally, the contract will come into existence. So even if any one of the party is having a problem, then they will be working only based on what is written in the contract. They cannot do anything else other than what is written on the contract. This is a traditional contract. What is a smart contract? A smart contract is you take the third party. So the main idea of a decentralized system is you should not have any third party at all. So why do you want to have a contract written on a paper and handed over to a third party, and we have to believe that this third party will do justice or will work properly? But in the case of blockchain, we don't want this contract to be handed over to any other third party. The contract can run on its own. So the contract, whatever is given here, the conditions can be programmed as a automated program. Whenever two people come into some kind of a deal, they write down the contract and put it on the blockchain, and finally it comes for the execution. So when the conditions are met, then the contract will execute. If the conditions are not met, then the contract will not execute. So it is basically kind of a condition. So if some condition occurs, then some work will happen. This is what called as a smart contract, which is, in simple terms, it is a program. That's it. Let us understand the disadvantages of the current transaction systems. Firstly, we'll be able to use only cash whenever we are doing any transaction locally. If a processing of transactions has to happen, it might take a very, very long time. And moreover, we have to rely on a third party for verification and execution of the transaction. Sometimes even we could have experienced whenever we do some digital transaction, the money might get deducted and it may not be added to the recipient's account. Then again, what we have to do, we have to contact that third party organization, say bank, and we have to raise a ticket so that they'll be able to solve. And hence we believe the third party's software to work correctly, or we completely believe that the third party will be right and we do the digital transaction. So this makes the process very, very complex. If a bank is compromised or the server of the bank is compromised, then the whole system will be affected, including the participant. Suddenly, if you log in into your account and if you see there is no balance in your account, there is some problem with the software and the software got corrupted, then what do we do with the money? We will not have any way to get out of it, right? So this is a major disadvantage of the current transaction system. Also, whenever do any transaction, we rely on the third party, and whatever the transaction fee that they do, or whatever the charges that they take, we allow them to take. So the process is becoming more and more expensive, and there is no boundary for the expenses as well. Having understood the disadvantages of the current transaction system, now we are in need of a system which will eliminate a third party organization, and we need not want to rely on a bank, so we need not want to worry about a particular server getting compromised. So what do? We go with the blockchain. So what is blockchain? A blockchain is a distributed ledger. All the nodes will have their own copy of the ledger, wherein all the nodes will be having the agreed upon copy of the ledger or the final value in the ledger. And blockchain is secure. You cannot access a blockchain without proper authorization. And heavy cryptographic algorithms are used in the background to ensure the security. And we'll be learning about the algorithms that are running in the background as well. And blockchain is transparent. So since every node is having the copy of the data, that is a copy of the ledger, everyone can verify any transaction at any time. They need not want to worry about what's happening in the background, because if you rely on a third-party organization, we rely completely on them and we believe the data what they provide. But here every node is having their own copy of the record, so they can verify themselves, and it's completely consensus based. So every participant in the network should agree on that particular transaction, and only if they accept that the transaction is valid, then the transaction will take place. So there is a very, very little chance for a invalid transaction to happen. And it's completely flexible, in the sense you don't want it to rely on a third party. So you write a program and you deploy it on the blockchain, and you want that smart contract to come into existence on a particular date, particular time. That is also is possible. So these are the features of blockchain. So what are the benefits of blockchain technology? Having these features, a lot of benefits that come into picture. One is there is no central authority, and there is no central authority verification, hence there is no extra charges or fee. They can share the assets directly. Say for example, if we take a bank, we believe the bank and we deposit the money in the bank, and the bank generates revenue by lending that money to another person, and it takes an interest. Here, actually the money of person A is lent to the person B, but here the benefit doesn't go directly to person A. The bank takes that particular benefit. But in case of blockchain, they can share the assets directly, and hence the participants will be benefited a lot. The transaction efforts are minimized. Participant, they have their own copy of the ledger. So the effort which is required for making a transaction will be very, very less. And as I discussed earlier, if you try to tamper the blockchain data, even if the hacker is successful in tampering the data in one node, it will be impossible for the hacker to compromise the data stored in all the other nodes as well. So these are the major benefits of blockchain technology, but every technology has its own drawbacks as well. The major drawback is scalability. In the current transaction system, we are able to do thousands of transactions per second. But here in blockchain, it is not possible. Say, for example, a transaction will not be processed immediately. Even a block creation, at least it will take 10 minutes on an average in Bitcoin. So Bitcoin is one application or one cryptocurrency. So when you send Bitcoin to someone else, you may not be able to receive the Bitcoin immediately. It will take some time. This comes up with a scalability issue. So when the nodes are increasing, there are hurdles in having copy of that ledger in all the nodes. And the next one is anonymity. The users are or cannot be identified in a blockchain network. If they choose to remain anonymous, they can still be anonymous. We use the current currency system, and we've been used up with a lot of the currency system payment. And nowadays the digital payments are also getting importance. So this economic viability, will that be possible for everyone in the society to own a cryptocurrency? We do not know. Or we can, at least in India, we are not yet in the situation where everyone are able to exchange their cryptocurrency. So economical viability is a drawback. Having understood the advantages and disadvantages, what is blockchain in the actual words of the authors Stuart Haber and Scott Tornetta? These two people, they came up with this idea of this distributed ledger. And say the ledger or the records which are called as blocks and which are linked with each other using cryptography. This idea is being adapted by Satoshi Nakamoto, and he came up with an application which is called as a Bitcoin application. Using the Bitcoin application, the cryptocurrency, the first cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, came into existence. Still, we do not know who this person is. Satoshi Nakamoto, we do not know whether he is a single person, man or a woman, or even we do not know whether they are the group of persons. The author, or we can say Bitcoin founder, remain anonymous. We're learning about Bitcoin and how Bitcoin works, and also how blockchain works, what are the components that are part of the blockchain, everything in the further videos. So in a nutshell, we can say blockchain, it is a digital ledger technology, and of course it has continuous growing list of records where these records are grouped into blocks, and these blocks are linked together using cryptography. The blockchain was created by the person or group of people that this is a pseudonym called Satoshi Nakamoto in 2008, and this is the first distributed public ledger where this ledger keeps track of all the Bitcoin cryptocurrency transactions. And the Satoshi Nakamoto, he used all the ideas which was given by Stuart Haber, Scott Tornetta, and Dave Baer.